Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Now it's past 5 o'clock Central European time. So now I'm going to start and I'm going to mute everybody that I can stay focused as much as I can stay focused. Okay. So welcome to everybody and thank you for joining in this session. I did this talk a couple days ago in German, and now I'm going to do it in English. And it has to do with a very special spiritual text, maybe one of the most special spiritual texts there is, actually, especially in Christianity. And that has to do with the Gospel of John. And now people are still coming in, so I'm going to have to do this. And the Gospel of John, a lot of you might know something about it. I know that some of you took a course with me a couple of years ago on the Gospel of John. And it's often said that the Gospel of John is a pool of water, a pond, big enough small enough that a child can play with it, and big enough that an elephant can swim in it. And that's true. I've been a student of the Gospel of John since my time with Daskalos. That's going back now 30 years or even longer. And still there are elements of the Gospel of John which, um, one second, I'm going to let somebody in, that I'm still seeing, um, seeing new. And that doesn't surprise me because it is a very layered text. And there's all sorts of dimensions in the Gospel of John, just like there is in the Book of Revelations. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself because we have some people here who don't know who I am. They might know from word of mouth who I am. My name is Paul Scorpin, and I'm an American by birth, but I've been away from the States for going on 35 years, longer actually. Uh, before I left the States, I studied at the University of Maine under a one professor who had a large impact on my life, and that was a Greek Cypriot named Kyriakos Markides, who was teaching sociology. He's since retired. And I took courses with him, and at that time he was writing a book about a Christian mystic and healer on the island of Cyprus. Um, During his sabbatical, he met with him, uh, and he was writing the book called The Magus of Strovolos, which became a bestseller. And I was attending Kyriakos' lessons because I wanted to know about sociology. So I wanted to know about Karl Marx and Weber and Durkheim, all these great sociologists, just so I could find my way in the world. And little did I know the impact that Kyriakos had in my life would be enormous, absolutely enormous. So because of Markides, I actually, instead of going to do a PhD at the Ohio State University, at the last moment, I signed up to do a one-year study in Kathmandu, Nepal. And I wanted to study shamanism there because the Himalayas are known as the oldest, as the place where shamanism was born, or one of the places where shamanism was born. And I got accepted, and I headed off to Kathmandu with a bunch of other students, and uh, had the time of my life, actually. I mean, I've had many good times, and I'm grateful for all of them, but I had a fantastic time there. And I ended up staying 2 years there because they made a mistake with my visa. It wasn't a mistake. It actually was very important because I had to get prepared to spend time with Daskalos. So I had to learn a lot about karma, and I had to learn a lot about the chakras, and I had to learn about, yeah, everything like that. And 1 year was not enough to do that, even though they teach it in Buddhism and Hinduism. Um, so I got deeply involved in that there. And then, after a long, long circle of studying with Kyriakos Markides, I ended up on the island of Cyprus in 1988 and started to attend the lessons of Daskalos. And I had plans to go back to India to study Sanskrit because I'd been accepted already by some very strange providence, I'd been accepted to Banaras Hindu University to study Sanskrit for 5 years, and I had even a letter to prove it. But they had a summer break, and so the summer break allowed me to finally get to Cyprus. And then, as fate would have it again, Dascalus's daughter invited me to lunch, and she said, "Paul, I've heard that you would like to come back." Uh, I don't know where she heard it from, and she said, "We would like to welcome you back in September because the school closed in summertime because of the heat mostly." And so she offered to give me a room, and I was torn because I had a deep love for India and Nepal, and I really wanted to study Sanskrit, though I wouldn't have much of a chance because I'm severely dyslexic. Uh, and I ended up saying, yes, I'll come back in September for a year before I head off to Varanasi. Um, and so I started working with Daskalos when I got back. And some of you, I think, maybe had the blessing uh, of seeing Daskalos or studying with Daskalos or seeing. I don't know if any of you did. It was truly a blessing, and it was even more of a blessing to be able to spend the last 6 years of his life with him, which I did um, as his closest student and as his bodyguard. I traveled with him to Europe a number of times and to America and to Brazil and other places that he would teach there, and also on holidays. We would go on holidays together. And I became very close with Daskalos, but it doesn't matter. So I just want to tell you something about John because this was my first exposure to John. Daskalos taught in a room called the Stoa, which was which was basically a backdoor garden house, which was converted uh, after the invasion of Turkish forces into a place for refugees to live. And it was oversized as a garden house, but so it was big enough to hold about 40 or 50 people in rows of chairs. And when I got back in September to start working with him, I, uh, he would sit here, like in this chair, and I would sit to his left. Uh, and I became known as I became known as his bodyguard. Uh, and I felt like his bodyguard because I was young at the time. I was 28 or 27, and he was in his middle 70s, going on towards his 80s. Uh, but he was probably physically stronger than I was at the time. He was a remarkable man at that age. And I would always have a glass of water for him or be prepared to change the cassette tapes. I don't know if you all remember cassette tapes, but you used to have to flip them over after 45 minutes. And that was the way we recorded the first talks. And so he would always he would record his own talks. I don't know why, but he did. And everybody was allowed to bring a somebody just wrote they're still using cassettes. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Uh, so that all the machines would go click, 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 and then I would get up, give him a glass of water, and then we would continue. After about a couple of weeks, anyway, uh, I closed my eyes to take in what he had to say because he was a remarkable, remarkable teacher, like the Gospel of John, because he taught in so many different dimensions that everybody felt they were being individually taught, really, literally. If you after a talk, maybe there are 60 people there, and everybody said that talk was for me, you know. And somebody said, no, that talk was for me, and then they would start fighting about it, and it was really cute, literally. And so I learned that the best way to take in a lesson was to close my eyes. And as I did that, I felt like there was an energy coming over Daskalos, just dropping over Daskalos and enveloping him. I just felt it, and I could feel it around me, even though at that time I couldn't feel very much. And then I decided I'd open my eyes and see if I could actually see this energy, and I did. It was a golden yellow mist or a golden yellow energy which just dropped over Daskalos, and so I was very, very shy, um, and I still am somewhat shy. But I decided that I would approach Daskalos. One of the few times that I actually approached him, because I was very timid and very respectful of the man. And I went to him one day and I said, you know, Duskley, I've been attending your lessons now for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and I noticed that a golden yellow color drops over you. And he always said, "Oh, very good, Paul." He always like, "Very good." And I said, "Yeah, okay, that's good. I'm glad you're pleased with it, but can you please tell me what it's all about?" And then he explained to me that that was the gospel, that was John the Apostle. And I knew about John the Apostle because, of course, you know, I was raised a Quaker in America, so I was somewhat familiar with the New Testament. And but I was still a bit shocked to find out that John the Apostle was actually visiting us every day. And he went on to explain. He said, "Yes, you know, I start the lessons out of courtesy, uh, and then John takes them over." And you could actually, after a few months of being there and listening to Daskalus teach, you could actually discern that very moment, a very, very fine moment where Daskalus would stop teaching, even though he would still be talking. And then John would then take over the talk. And Daskalus said when John came and took over his body, as it were, consciously, and Daskalus remained fully conscious, he would then leave his body and find a place in the room, though there was no place in the room. That was it was filled with people. And he would then also he would take in John's lesson. Uh, and that sounded the first time I heard that, I sounded a bit crazy, but I started saying, "Wow, that's really remarkable that we're all being bathed in the wisdom of John." And you know, sometimes a young couple would come with a baby, an infant, because they wanted to visit Daedalus, and they just had maybe a a year-old baby or something, and they wanted the baby also to be in the presence of this great healer and teacher, which I understand fully. And Daedalus said, Paul, just don't allow them in the building. They can stay in the garden. And at first I found that hard, but then I just went to him. I said, why don't you love babies? Because he really did love babies. He that's something I share with him. Every time I see somebody holding a baby, I just want to say, "Can I hold your baby?" I don't do it. Especially here in Germany, you would never do that. To a foreigner or anybody, a man, to take a baby. But Daedalus loved babies, and he loved dogs and cats a lot, probably because of their innocence. And then he said, "Yeah, because when John comes in, I have to. One of his jobs is to protect the atmosphere, that John can deliver his energy and his message without any disturbance, like a baby crying." And so that made sense to me. You can't have a baby crying and then Dasklos trying to stay focused on what he's trying to say, or deliver this message of John to the people who came from a long way away. So I got used to that, and even when I received private lessons from Dasklos, and I did every day, I'm not ashamed to say that. I mean, I was the only one that was there all the time. People were coming and going. That was Daskalos' wish. Daskalos made it a very strong point that nobody should stay there. It's not an ashram. But because I was his bodyguard and I was in charge of putting the books into an order and also recording all the talks, I was the one who was staying there all the time. And because of that, I think he decided that I was a good vessel for his teachings. Uh, Whether or not I was, I don't know, but he decided that he would really pour everything into me over the course of 6 years, which was fantastic. It was just fantastic. And then, as Daedalus had the stroke on June 27th, uh, 1994, big day. and he was laid low by the stroke, incapacitated. He could no longer walk and he could no longer speak. And he was then bedridden for 14 months. And I was sitting most of the nights by his bed. He actually was my first client as a healer. He tried to encourage me to become a healer for years, and I just said, "No, Daslos, I'm too intellectual for this. I don't understand healing." And then, as Daslos was there, laying in bed with apparent pain, I laid my hand on his head, and he became my first client, um, which was also an honor. And then, after he passed over in August of 1995, 14 months later, I moved to Munich to be with Birgit, my wife, because she was living there as an actress, and now she's doing very, very important work, extremely important work for the world peace. And once I got there, I was lost. And basically, John came to me and took me under his wing, and he said, "Paul, you know, you're familiar with who I am and why I'm here. Um, I will work with you until you find your way." And I still haven't found my way, and he's still working with me. In other words, um, I don't read any books since about 10 years because I can, this sounds arrogant, but trust me, it's not. I can just ask John a question, and I get the answer within a very short time. Um, Now, I want to get into a little bit about why I'm giving this talk. First of all, I gave a seminar just before Christmas on some alien energies from other planets and other galaxies. Uh, I'm going into that because Dasclus was very involved in that himself when he was younger. And in one seminar, I was told very clearly, and I double checked it, and I was told again that it's true, that even though the Christian calendar is somewhat of an invention, in other words, uh, the Christian calendar, which goes from Christmas into Lent and then into Easter and then into Pentecost, and with all these other days mixed in, including uh, the Ascension of Christ and so forth, and the Ascension of Maria. It's made up by the Catholic Church over a long period of time, but still it's very inspired. A lot of things are still very inspired. Um, and I was told that from Christmas, and now that's about 2 weeks ago, going into Easter, it's going to be an extremely tumultuous time filled with a lot of turmoil in the whole world. And it's not going to be easy. Uh, and we see that's happening already. I know that the folks in Canada, you're prepared to have a new prime minister soon, in the new year or soon. And in America, we don't have a new president. We have a president who we had already. And we all probably you all aware that Elon Musk is not a politician, but he's having a strong influence on the political direction of Europe and of England as well, pouring a lot of money into political parties which are very far to the right. And that's all well and good. That's just the way things are right now. And it's also a testimony that the paradigm shift that we are going through is picking up steam. We're going through a paradigm shift which is almost incomparable to any paradigm shift we've ever gone through. I think we can only compare it maybe to the fall of Atlantis. Even the fall of the Roman Empire, which was huge, took place over nearly 1,000 years. And the paradigm shift that we're going through has been going on now for at least 25 years, if not longer. And it is now reaching a point where it's about to go in another direction. Anytime a paradigm shift is unfolding and an old paradigm is dying out, in other words, an old paradigm is losing its grasp or its authority on the situation, then those forces that are embedded in an old paradigm become very aggressive. I don't call them opposition forces because they have a very important role to play in that. But these are the vested interests of the pharmaceutical industry, of the military industrial complex, and of the banking industry, and also of the state politics, both domestic politics as well as international politics, and many, many other things. And they're becoming very anxious now because they know they can no longer control the situation. They've done their best to really divide us. They've done the best to divide people, even within the family, with the advent of the COVID vaccines. Families were torn apart because the people who were not vaccinated were aggressive towards the people who were vaccinated, and the other way around. And that's the old Roman instinct of divide and rule. Uh, this Roman instinct of divide and rule is being played out right in front of our eyes. It's what's happening with Palestine and with Israel. Hopefully now, as of today, there's going to be a break in the killing, the slaughter, and also let's hope there will be peace in Ukraine with Ukraine and Russia. And all I'm trying to say is that this is also there's also a good sign in that. The more aggressive the counter forces are, then it means the more fear they have that they can't spend so much time here on the earth with us. I know that through my healing work because I lead people through the 7 treatments, which I teach as a method of healing. And often people are somehow blocked to come to the treatment because the family karma inside of them doesn't want them to come to me because I'm a riverbed for the divine mercy, and they have fear for the divine mercy, which is love. And don't forget, we have the best example of this 2,000 years ago with the birth of the Christ child in Bethlehem. Bethlehem. Um, as the Christ child was born in Bethlehem, the 3 kings were underway, where they were coming to pay homage and to bring gifts, and they were interrupted by King Herod, who was a quasi-Jew. Not really, he wasn't a Jew, he was half Jewish, but not on the mother's side. If he was mother's side, then he would be Jewish. It was on the father's side. And even to this day, he's a hero to the Jews because he built and built and built and built and built and built and built. He built unbelievable structures all over the Holy Land. And he learned from the 3 kings that the Christ child was born, which was a prophecy, the Messiah. And he said, no, 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 this can't be. I'm not going to allow this. And he sent out his soldiers over the landscape of Judea, and they slaughtered everybody, every boy under the age of 2. It's called the slaughter of the innocents. But the thing is, when love incarnates like the Christ child, then it has no opponent. Okay, that means anything that has no opponent can no longer be killed because there is no killer. Do you understand? Because love has no enemy. So, as we all know, Jesus and Joseph go off to Egypt, to Cairo, and visit, no, without a doubt, visit the temples there, to Isis and to Osiris and to Horus and to all these wonderful temples that are now destroyed, mostly destroyed in Cairo. And he came back and started his mission at the age of 2 or 3, we don't know. Um, and uh, when he reached the age of 30, he was then baptized by his cousin John the Baptist, as we all know. And a dove entered him and said, "This is my favorite child." And then he started to do his ministry, and he started to collect disciples. He chose his disciples, and one of the disciples he chose was John, young John, who's also known as the beloved disciple. And John was by far the youngest disciple because he was probably about 16, 15, 16 years old when Christ was 30 years old. And as we know, Christ was then crucified at the age of 33 in a few months, and John was then under 20. And John, with the Mother Mary and probably with Maria Magdalena, were being threatened with danger in the Holy Land, so they set off to Ephesus in Turkey today. And that's where John actually lived until he was sent off to Patmos to receive the book of Revelations. So he lived there for a long time, maybe 50 years, maybe 60 years. And also the Mother Maria lived there too. They even found her house, which you can visit today. They built a house where she probably lived. And John wrote his Gospel of John probably in Ephesus, maybe with the help of Maria Magdalena. There's an esophagus for Maria Magdalena there. And I was there with some people, including Stella, who's taking part right now, and we were visiting these graves, and some people were taking pictures, and every one of the pictures, we were just debating, could this be where Maria Magdalena spent her days? Because a lot of people believe it's in the Provence. And then there's this huge white light which came into all of the pictures. You remember that, Stella? That ray of light which came down directly on her grave. That doesn't matter. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to dwell into that, but that was just remarkable. And then, as I said, John was then sent off to the island of Patmos, and he received the book of Revelations there at the ripe old age of 80, maybe 90 years old. And the remarkable thing about the Gospel of John, which I'm going to go into now, and the book of Revelations is they're both entirely built up out of probably one of the most mystical numbers there is, and that's the number 7. Okay, the the book of Revelations is just a remarkable text, spiritual text, because it's built up out of 7 times 7. Starts with the 7 letters on the 7 communities and ends with a marriage between the new earth and the heavenly city. There's a participant who's taking part right now who actually lives on the island of Patmos. We've never met, as far as I know, but she lives there, and as very few people do live there. And the Gospel of John, let's go to that now. The Gospel of John is also a remarkable text because in the Gospel of John, written by John, there's no doubt about this for Daslos and for myself. It is built up of 21 chapters, which is 3 times 7. And throughout the Gospel of John, Jesus performs miracles and healings and has conversations that you just don't find in the other 3 Gospels. Matthew, Luke, and Mark don't have these. So they're called synoptic because they're seen from one eye. And John is an exceptional gospel because it has very little to do with the other gospels. And the Gospel of John was the primary gospel for practically every Christian mystic throughout time, including Meister Eckhart, Francis from Assisi, Hildegard von Bingen, Rudolf Steiner, Teresa from Avila, and Alla, both women, and yeah, they all love the Gospel of John for a good reason. So what does Jesus do then is, especially with the healings, and a couple of the healings belong to this workshop that we're going to do, like the healing of the man who is paralyzed or the healing of the man born blind. They happen always on the Sabbath, the day before the Sabbath, or on the Sabbath. And the Sabbath is a Jewish day of rest and rejoice. It's celebrated because in the book of Moses, uh, uh, God creates everything here, and on the seventh day, he rests and enjoys everything he created. And the Jews took that so seriously that they said, okay, we will work 6 days a week, but on the seventh day, we will do exactly what God does. We will rest. Beautiful concept, actually. But it's also forbidden to do anything then for the Orthodox Jews, including heal. Uh, so the Gospel of John, Jesus heals almost always on the sixth hour or the sixth day, going into a new state of consciousness, which is the heart chakra. Okay, that is the absolute. That is what the Gospel of John offers us, is a journey into the heart chakra. When I call it a journey, uh, what I'm trying to say is we transverse a landscape within us. Okay, there is a landscape in the Holy Land. It has to do with Sea Gennesareth, which is below the sea level by a lot, going up to Jerusalem, which is 750 meters above sea level. And it's a beautiful landscape. I don't know if any of you have been there. I've been there a lot. Um, but John also describes an inner landscape within us. So Daskalos talked about energy centers, chakras. We all know that from India or from other teachers, that we have 7 primary chakras and then secondary chakras. And we literally are a landscape, each one of us. We are. Um, with a lot of roadways, a lot of pathways, a lot of hills, a lot of valleys. And let me say something now about, before I talk to you about the 7 miracles and what they offer us, and the 7 I ams, what they offer us. Let me say something about why the Gospel of John might be more important now than ever for us. First of all, I want to talk about the initiations of the Apostle John that we find in the Gospel of John. There are 3 initiations that John goes through very clearly. The first initiation is at the Last Supper. So, in the Gospel of John, there is no Last Supper, and inasmuch as there's no breaking of bread or wine. There's the washing of the feet in the Gospel of John, but there is no Last Supper. However, John does lay at this gathering where Jesus washes the feet of the apostles. Um, John lays his head on the chest of Christ. Now, the heart of Christ, for some of us, belongs to the heart of God. In other words, the heart that pulsates from the divine origins pulsates in Christ as the perfect balance between elevated love, wisdom, and power. Okay. When John laid his ear and his head on the chest of Christ, his heartbeat began to beat with the heartbeat of Jesus. And in him, he started to unfold the absolute wisdom, power, and love. And that's the first initiation. And this is why his gospel is absolutely extraordinary. The second initiation comes after Christ walks the path of the crucifixion. So Christ goes the path of the crucifixion, and he's then nailed to a cross, and 4 people stay with him. 3 are women, including his mother, Maria Magdalena, and the sister of his mother, and John. They stay true to their teacher and their son. They stay true. They would never abandon the Christ in a time of need. And then Jesus looks down at John in the Gospel of John, and he says to John, he points to his mother, and he says to John, "Behold your mother. Behold your mother." And then he looks at his mother, and he points to the Apostle John, and he says to his mother, "Behold your child." At that moment, uh, John is reborn out of the womb of the Virgin Mary spiritually. In other words, he's reborn from a virgin, and he is then absolutely freed of all personal karma with this rebirth or with this birth. Yeah. And so at that moment, he's at the same level of the Christ. He's in the Christ consciousness. Okay? So now that was the second initiation. And now Jesus is placed in a grave, and he's then going through the underworld for 3 days, and he is then resurrected. And a woman comes to the grave and says to the gardener there, "I'm looking for my teacher." And the gardener says, "Why are you looking for the dead among the living among the dead?" And that was Maria Magdalena. And then Jesus spends time with his disciples, 40 days, also eating fish and breaking bread on Sea Gennesareth. And then his time comes where he's going to return to the Father. He says this, "I'm going to my Father, I'm going to your Father, and I'm going to prepare a place for you. I'm going to prepare a place for you." And the last scene, he's on Sea Gennesareth with John and Peter. And he looks at John and he says to John, "You stay here. You stay here." And he says to Peter, "You come with me." And Peter is confused by this. Peter is easily confused. And he starts going with Jesus, and then he turns to Jesus and says, "Why did you tell him to stay here, and why do I go with you?" And basically, Jesus says to Peter, "That has nothing to do with you. Just come, just come with me." And one of the readings in this is that Peter is the first pope of the church, and he needed to spend more time with the Christ. But John, who's already Christ-like, doesn't need to do that. So why did Jesus say to John, "You stay here," is because the inner path of Christianity needs a guardian. It needs somebody to take care of it on this earth. And who better than John? Which is why Daskalos had John as a spirit guide. And which is why Rudolf Steiner and Meister Eckhart and all the other ones worked so closely with John, because this was John's destiny to do that. Now, that means that since the time of organized Christianity, which started with the Catholic Church and then was then split also into the Orthodox Church and then much later into the Protestant churches, we developed a new paradigm, a brand new paradigm, really a great departure from existing religions. Christianity, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, as the children of Abraham, developed the Judaic Christian tradition, which was a huge departure from the old Egyptian belief system. I think we even have somebody here who's Egyptian. Maybe might even be in Egypt now. And a huge departure from the Greco-Roman religions. Why do I say that? Because both the old Egyptian belief system and the Hellenic system, they are defined as polytheistic. But They had no fear at all because their gods were living with them on earth and in heaven. They had no shame because sexuality was divine, because their gods in Egypt and also in the Hellenic gods, the Olympia gods, were sleeping with each other and having children. So when we sleep with each other and have children, we're doing exactly what God is doing, which is praise on God. And they had no guilt because they had no concept of original sin, none whatsoever. In fact, to the contrary, both these religious traditions in Egypt and also in the Greco, they believed that the original state was chaos and that the gods were there to protect us from chaos. And therefore, they woke up every day in gratitude. But with the advent of the Judaic Christian tradition, we decided to go in fully in another direction, which means we decided to go deeply into patriarchy. Has nothing to do with Christ, by the way. Nothing to do with Christ. Okay, Christ was not a patriarch. He was not Christ. Without a doubt, his favorite student was Maria Magdalena, without a doubt. We see this in the Gospels, the other Gospels. We see this in the Gospel of John too, by the way. And because she was the first one to find him after the resurrection. And when you start to believing in patriarchy over matriarchy, and you start to believe in original sin and that Christ died for our sins, and so forth. And you start to define sexuality as something which is basically against religion, a sin, a vice, as it were, not to be enjoyed or even honored. And you start to create a lot of fear because God becomes so remote. God becomes extremely remote, distant. Then what happens to the chakra systems? The chakra system is enormous. In other words, look at the chakra system, okay? So basically, we have the heart chakra, which is the chakra of love, okay? And symbolically, it is a chakra of love, but also the human heart pumps 7,000 liters of blood through the body every day, 7,000. So it's more than just a temple. It is actually the center of our being and probably the home of our soul. And then we have three chakras above that, the throat chakra, the third eye, and the crown chakra. And these three chakras above us are wonderful uh, vessels to receive very impersonal and very universal wisdom and teachings. In other words, the three upper chakras tend to be much less personal than the three lower chakras. When we go down to the three lower chakras, the solar plexus, hara chakra, or sacral chakra, and the root chakra, they become suddenly extremely personal, especially in their relationship to daily life and also in their relationship to sexuality. And then also, where does all the fear and the shame and the guilt go? It goes in the lower chakras more than it does in the upper chakras. So we've created a huge division between the lower self and the upper self, which we didn't have that at the time of Christ, and to the contrary. Why do I say that? Because uh, in eternity, in the human form, these seven chakras have been a great gift to us because through the seven chakras, we are allowed to partake in seven levels, without a doubt. And we are allowed to be universal or even cosmic beings through the seven chakras when they're united. Um, and we are allowed to experience ourselves and each other and the world around us in very distinct manners, so many distinct ways through each chakra. So in eternity, there is something pre-programmed in us that the lower chakras, which have to do with the creative forces and life, uh, have a different disposition as the three upper chakras. But there are times, like in old Egypt and also in Anatolia and the Greek islands, before the advent of Christianity, and I love Christianity, I teach it with a passion. There are times where we value the chakras equally, and there are times where we don't. When we enter a time where we don't value the chakras equally, then we develop a paradigm around that and institutions around that. And when we're talking about institutions, we're talking about international institutions, especially in the last 100 years or so with international trade, uh, politics internationally, politics domestically. We have a economic system, whether it's going to be communism or capitalism or socialism or something else. None of them work anymore, by the way. None of them do. And we have school systems built up around that, and we also have family structures built up around that, the nuclear family. And then we have built up around that whole structure, we have then the pharmaceutical industry, which has become extremely powerful. We have the medical industry, and we have then also, to complement that, we have also forms of psychotherapy and even madhouses and hospitals and modes of transportation. You know that. You all partake in this like I do. And we all have very, very sophisticated telephones, which have dramatically altered our lives. And that's all well and good, but when you, over 2,000 years, you don't live in a balance between the masculine and the feminine, where you allowed Maria Magdalena to be defined as the adulteress in the Gospel of John, paradox. Pope Gregory in the year 400 something said that she's the adulteress in the Gospel of John, and the Catholic Church only corrected themselves without an apology in 1969, saying there's no evidence that Maria Magdalena was the adulteress. Shungood. But what I'm trying to tell you is that when all your institutions, all of our institutions are collapsing at the same time. Okay, we have two primary currencies in the world. One is the euro, and the other one is the dollar. And now there are other currencies which are emerging, including Bitcoin. And we know that the dollar is totally in debt because we left the gold standard behind. It doesn't matter. And that means the dollar is totally reliant on Chinese investments and notes. And the euro is not strong, and the eurozone is not strong. It's surviving, thank God, but it's not strong. And it's all very fragile. And the school systems that prevail now have become a nightmare for children because the school systems have been co-opted by the economy. And so has, by the way, the university system in North America and also here. Because this idea of a liberal arts education has become an antique. When I was in school with Markides and so forth, then that was the time where they actually developed citizens who were morally round because we had to take courses in things that had nothing to do with what we studied, like literature, like astronomy, like physics, philosophy, against our will. But the idea was the universities was there to create citizens. And that we've gone away from. We've just gone away from it, completely gone away from it. And that's what I'm trying to say is it's not only the universities which have been co-opted by the economy to basically create commodities that can work in a workplace, but even that's gone into the elementary schools, high schools, elementary schools. It's even gone down into the kindergarten now, because now even in the kindergarten here, they're getting homework, which means they're preparing even kindergarten students for an economy. to be for an economy to become a commodity in a workplace. And that I'm just using that as an example, and we don't need to go into the COVID time as an example where the pharmaceutical industry was allowed to go way overboard and produce vaccines which were not even tested and made a huge profit over on that. And as we know in America, and I think the same thing's happening in Canada, the same thing's happening here in Germany and Europe, is that the rich are getting richer, and the accumulation of extreme wealth in the hands of very few people, 3 or 4% of the population, owning 95% of the wealth, is what's going on in America and slowly what's going on in Europe, which is not sustainable. It never has been. We know that because every time poverty is unleashed among the population will at one point rise up. They always do. And all this points to is instability. Okay, which is why the next 4 months going into Easter of 2025 will be a very difficult time for all of us. I imagine already is, but it's only because we're going through a paradigm shift. And if any of you know the book of Revelations, I know that at least Stella was on the island of Patmos with me for a week to go into that. Then you know that this apocalyptic text always talk about this interplay between counter forces, or this interplay between a dying paradigm and an emerging paradigm is very important, and it unfolds over time. And it never goes backwards. It never goes backwards. It always goes forward. And it's often symbolically or spiritually a lot of violence between forces that don't want to leave and forces that want to prevail. And as we know with the book of Revelations, it ends in a marriage between the new earth and the heavenly city in a rebirth. Okay. So why is the Gospel of John then so important? First of all, it was written to protect the heart of original Christianity. It is the cornerstone of original Christianity. As you all know, in 1944, they found the Nag Hammadi Gospels, the lost Gospels. They weren't lost; they were banned. We call them the lost Gospels, but they were banned by the church. And some very, very nice Coptic priest said, "These are too important. I'm going to bury them in a clay vessel and bury them under a city called Nag Hammadi, which still exists today, by the way." And he was walking with his sheep, and in places like Cyprus, in places like um, Egypt, and in places like Anatolia, they always carry a stick to pound the earth as they go because they want to scare away the snakes. So he was pounding with his stick the earth, and then he heard a hollow sound, an empty sound, and he said, "That's not normal." And he started to dig it up, and they found 112 gospels which were forbidden to read. And those are the what's called the Nag Hammadi Gospels. And I've made 3 films of them in German, including the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Maria Magdalena and the Gospel of Philippos, which are all on YouTube to watch and listen to, and for no cost at all, but only in German. I would love to do it in English, but I live in Germany. And the thing is that the Gospel of John, where we're standing now, is a text which, let me just explain. I told you that it's built out of 21 chapters. There are 7 miracles. The first one's at the wedding at Cana, where Christ turns water into wine. The second one is the healing of the nobleman, his child, who's deadly sick. And the third one is the healing of the paralyzed man. The fourth one is the transfiguration of bread and fish to feed 5,000. The sixth one is when Christ walks on the water. And the fifth one. And the sixth one is Christ heals the blind man, the man who's born blind. And the last one is raising of Lazarus from the dead. And these are dispersed throughout the gospel. And the gospel starts with this because the first thing that Christ does after he's baptized is he goes to Cana, which has to do with the root chakra. And the element of water is then transformed into a higher element. This is why it's called alchemy, because Christ takes these water vessels, which are emptied, and fills them with water, and then transmutes them into an element which is nearly unearthly, divine. And that has to do a lot with the root chakra, because the main element in me and the main element in you is water. You're 75% water, if not more. And then somewhere in the middle of the Gospel of John, Jesus starts saying the 7 I ams. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door to the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and so forth. They go through until the very end. And the last one is I'm the vineyard keeper. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vineyard keeper. Now, very shortly, every religion proceeding with the advent of Christianity and the Judaic Christian tradition in general were basically a balance between the divine feminine and divine masculine. If you look at every religion that coexisted at the time of early Christianity, all the way through India, China, they had a balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And that makes sense, because if there is a source of everything, then this source has to manifest itself in the first place with two primary forces, and that would be the masculine and the feminine. I don't know how many of you have been to Göbekli Tepe. I know Stella's been to Göbekli Tepe with me, but Göbekli Tepe is in southeast Anatolia, and it's a temple complex which has only been dug up partly since 1996. And Göbekli Tepe was the largest temple complex in the world, 10 hectares, and also the oldest, because it's over 12,000 years old. And now they found as many as 13 of these. And they're built by people we had no idea what they believed in and how they did this. It's truly remarkable. I lead tours there, and every time I go there, I'm just speechless, because you can't understand what you're looking at. You can only be bathed in it. In any case, in every one of these temple complexes are circles, and then two columns in the middle. And these two columns in the middle are bigger than the columns that surround that. They're as big as 6 meters high, hand chiseled from one stone, which is remarkable, with even animal figures on them. And there's a lot of debate what they mean, but I think it comes down to something so simple. It's divine masculine and divine feminine in balance. So going back to the Gospel of John and the 7 miracles and the 7 I am statements, what can we imagine? Okay, the 7 primary chakras they receive energy. They also project energy, okay? Some receive energy, some project energy, some do both, okay? But there are definitely chakras which only receive energy. We don't have to go into that. That means they are vessels for energy, okay? And up until now, let's put it this way, up until now, at the end of a paradigm shift, and how complicated families have become, because most families are traumatized, without a doubt. Your parents were probably, to a very large extent, traumatized. Mine were, and they were both philosophers. I was fully traumatized even in the during my the gestation period in the womb, and I was fully traumatized as a young child. Um, and I've come to terms with that. It's okay with me now. But I know that almost everybody around me is traumatized to some extent, and trauma became very much the norm. That's why the pharmaceutical industry is doing so well, and that's why uh, the alcohol industry and the drug industry is doing so well, because we have to manage with the fact that we're traumatized. And also, we see that in the seven miracles of John, including the blind man, including the lame man, including the nobleman who has a sick child, they're in a state of trauma. They're going through a state of trauma from loss, the handicap. So even then, it was a time of trauma. We have other trauma now that they didn't have then, including, well, they had folk trauma, definitely. But now, I truly believe that all of us are in a state of trauma, in as much as that 125 years ago, 95% of us were involved in agriculture. 95% of us were involved in agriculture 150 years ago, and now 3% of us are involved in agriculture. And in the meantime, we've built up very complicated and very sophisticated civilizations, extremely sophisticated civilizations. And we're no longer working the land. We're no longer raising crops. We're no longer planting and harvesting. And we're no longer raising livestock, which means that to a very large extent, we're cut off from the cycles of life, except for when we have children ourselves. We're cut off from nature to a large extent. And emotionally, up until the Industrial Revolution and then the Information Revolution and so forth, uh, things unfolded very slowly, like the invention of the wheel all the way into, what do I know? Things unfolded very slowly, and emotionally we could keep pace with that. We could really keep pace with that. But things have happened so quickly now in 150 years that emotionally we can't keep pace with it, emotionally, we're not that sophisticated that we can keep pace with it. So even that we're somewhat in a state of shock, even though we're not aware of it. Maybe you're not, I don't know. I shouldn't tell you you're in a state of shock. I think some of you would agree. uh, You don't have to listen to me. I mean, Daskalus told us all we were 95% subconscious, and nobody had a problem with that because he said it was so much love. Normally, that would be so offensive. Um, so then, when you're in this state where your chakras are no longer in balance with each other, and when you're leaving one paradigm behind and going into another paradigm, then you are very fortunate to have in your hands a divine text, that will lead you through this landscape. And there is no better divine text that would lead you through this landscape than the Gospel of John. And that's why I have decided, after a long break now, because I've taught this many times before. I know that some of you have taken part. Somebody there in Norway has taken part. First of all, you cannot understand the Gospel of John through the lens of the divine masculine only. In other words, we have two perspectives on spiritual text. One is rooted in the divine masculine, and the other is rooted in divine feminine. Okay, this is the fact. Take, for example, the Beatitudes that Jesus gives us in Matthew 5:5. The Beatitudes are an unbelievable set of mantras, divine mantras, which have a huge element of the divine feminine. Huge. Meekness, pure in heart, poor in spirit. Same thing with the Gospel of John. And it's my deep, deep belief, my deep, deep belief, and I've only woken up to this recently, is that it is basically the divine feminine, which will transform the seven chakras through the miracles, the wonders, that they will be able to receive the I ams from the Christ. So that means that what the divine feminine does to the chakras is transform the chakras basically into wombs that they can receive the seed of the Christ, which are the seven I am statements. That's why they start later in the gospel, much later in the gospel, because first the chakras have to be transformed into new wombs to receive a birth, which has to do with the merging of the egg with the seed of the Christ. Okay? And they come together in a marriage, thanks to the Gospel of John, one after the other, more so now than ever, as it's going to unfold in the next 3.5 months. Okay? So it's my hope. Um, I'll be honest with you. I have more than enough people to do this in German, and I'm doing it in German, and we're starting soon. Right now, we don't have enough people who want to take part with this, who want to take part in English, which is a pity, less for myself, because I have my German group, but I would love to do it in English. And what we're going to do is we're going to do it over 8 sessions, starting next Sunday, not this Sunday, but next Sunday, a week from this Sunday, where we'll be experiencing the marriage at Cana and the first I am, which is I am the light of the world. I am the bread of life. In the root chakra to transform the root chakra with the first meeting, with the second meeting to transform the sacral chakra, with the third meeting to transform the solar plexus, going towards Easter. And then the last session, I'm going to show you a beautiful treatment that you can do as hands-on healing, or also you can do as a self-healing technique, which is called the alchemy treatment, where we learn to ask the divine feminine and masculine to pour into the chakras to bring in the seven miracles together with the seven I ams. And John will guide us through these. John told me he's going to guide us through these weeks together. And also everybody who takes part will get from me, not from me because I'm a riverbed for this, will get 7 distant treatments, or if you're here, you get 7 hands-on treatments spread out over these 3 months. You'll get the treatments. We'll make a time, and then you'll lie down. I'll tell you how to do this. I can send you all the documents. I've been doing it for years, distant healing. So spread out through this work with the Gospel of John, this travel through this inner landscape. You'll also receive 3 treatments, and we're going to build up a community where we can share ideas with each other over Slack. I don't know if you know Slack, it doesn't matter. It's just an online community, and where we can post things that are of interest to all of us as we travel across this landscape together with John and with Daskalos. And the reason why I encourage you to take it or to do it yourself, just through your own study, is because it's time to let go of a lot of trauma right now. It really is. It's time to let go of trauma at an accelerated pace, which we've maybe never seen before. And when I talk about trauma, I'm talking about family karma. I'm talking about personal karma, which we no longer need. I'm talking about collective karma, which is the paradigm. I'm talking about pan-generational trauma, which is really powerful, going back 10 generations. I'm talking about epigenetic trauma. I'm talking about folk trauma. I'm talking about original sin as trauma. And a lot of that we can just shed away like a snake sheds away his skin or her skin when they no longer need it and uh, go through a rebirth now through Easter, ending in the path of the crucifixion, and then a resurrection, which is a rebirth. And then I've been also told that it's going to be an unbelievably nice time going towards Pentecost, which is June of this year, late this year. And Pentecost symbolizes the inpouring of the divine feminine through this dove that comes down. Because the dove, the Holy Spirit is the divine feminine, and it is symbolized by a dove that comes down over Jesus Christ and stays with Jesus Christ. Okay. And it's going to come down again as in a beautiful dissension on all of us in June this year at the Pentecost time. And there I'll be offering the Book of Revelations on the island of Patmos, which this year might be even more extraordinary than any other year. All right, folks. We can do a short question round, but really we shouldn't ask general questions because then we go there and there and there and there. If you have any questions pertaining to the workshop that I'm about to offer, if people have a problem now with finances, it's possible to pay in rates over the course of a year. And it's also possible to get a discount if you're really hard up, which a lot of people are right now. I know that. So if you have any questions about the Gospel of John, about the 7 miracles, I didn't go into details because that belongs to the travel together, the journey together. Could I please say the 7 I ams? Sure. The 7 I ams are, you should know this, Haniel. I'm just having fun with you. The 7 I ams are, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world is the second. They're longer. I am the light of the world, and whoever travels with me will no longer be in darkness. But the core I am is, I am the light of the world. And I am the door to the sheep is the third. I am the good shepherd, which is the fourth. The fifth is, I am the resurrection and the life. Whew. I am the resurrection and the life. And the sixth is, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And the last one is I am the true vine, and my father and my mother are the vineyard keepers. No, I can't. I can't, Paul, because everything that I teach comes to me directly from John and from Daskalos. I'm not saying I have the truth. I'm not saying that what I'm going to present is the absolute truth. But there's a lot of books out there, and none of them I can recommend from my heart. And I'll tell you why, Paul. Because all of the literature written about the Gospel of John in the last 100 years or so was written through the lens of the divine masculine, of patriarchy, of wisdom teaching. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, in other words, even Daskalos loved talking about the Gospel of John. He adored the Gospel of John. And he had a full relationship with John, seamless. They were seamless. However, Daskalos did call the body a prison. And Daskalos had no peace with the body until he had the stroke, which we actually will go into with the first session with the marriage at Cana, because Daskalos had resistance against the divine feminine because he was so much in the Christ. But there's a message there, Paul. Can you go into the Christ consciousness only through the divine masculine? And the answer is probably no. You need a balance. So when you ask me, can I recommend any books? No, I can't. From my heart, I can't. There's a lot of literature out there, a lot, a lot. And I know a lot of it because I read a lot of it 20 years ago. But I can tell you most of the books written about the Gospel of John, uh, uh, I record all of them. Yes, I do record all of them. As much as possible, I record all the talks that I give and all the meditations I give, and then they'll be posted online for about a week after the session. Yeah, I know. So to answer your question, Paul, no, I cannot from my heart recommend anything to read. And it's not because I'm against them. It's just because I don't know them. Maybe there are recent books about that which can explain that um, in a way that satisfies you or speaks to you. Let's put it that way. Yeah. You're most welcome, Paul. We actually have two Cypriots on board here. We have Mario and Paul, both in Canada. You Cypriots have to hang together, you know. You're not as bad as the Greeks, where more Greeks are in exile than in Greece. But there's a lot of Cypriots living outside of Cyprus. I'll be back in Cyprus to teach Healing 1 and 2 in May. I made my first return to Cyprus last May after 28 years, and I felt like the prodigal son going home. I actually went to Daskalos' grave for the first time since the funeral, and I said, Daskali, will you forgive me if I haven't taught up to your standard? And then, uh, thank you, Anya. She just recommended a book. I don't know it. And I was sitting there at Daskalos' grave asking for forgiveness if I haven't lived up to his expectations. And I'll just tell you this, it was the first time that I could receive the love from Daskalos. Daskalos gave me so much love every day, but I didn't believe I was worthy of this love when I was with him. I was 28 years old, 29 years old, 34 years old, and I was filled with trauma that I was not even aware of, and I thought I'm not worthy of the love of this great teacher. But last May, I finally said, Daskali, thank you. I love you too. That's how long this path takes sometimes. So Haniel put a text in from a guy named Raphael Prayer about the seven miracles. It says it's good. Okay, so if you have any questions, please feel free to write me an email. Yeah, I do have an online. If you go to theosis.com, you'll see. So he only writes in French, he doesn't write in English? Are the books not translated in English? Anyhow, I don't know. You can maybe Hanya, you can put your email address in there that people can contact you if they want to learn more before I close the session. Uh, if you go to theosis.com, you'll see the whole program, the dates and a description. There you have Haniel's email if you want to contact her about this Canadian guy who wrote a book on the wonders, the miracles. Okay. Um, So just go to theosis.com and you'll see the whole program. Oh, really? Do you know the date? Do you know the date, Daniel? Oh, everybody goes to Patmos at sometimes. Oh, nice, 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 nice. Maybe we'll meet this time. Oh, that's early. All the hotels are still closed. Okay, enough talk about Patmos. If you haven't been there, I'll be teaching the Book of Revelations in June this year. And you're welcome to take part in that. I do it every year. There are some people like Haniel that you go to this island once to visit and you end up being trapped there for one reason or the other. Okay, everybody stay in peace, stay in hope, stay in love, stay in trust, and be role models for everybody around you. A lot of people right now are going into insecurity. They're going into fear. A lot of people are becoming more aggressive right now because they feel like things are out of control. And they're looking for people, they have longing In German it's called Sehnsucht. They have longing to come into encounter with people who are filled with joy and hope and trust. So be that, okay? Especially in difficult countries, be that. Okay. Love to you all. Thank you for taking part. Bye now.
Thank you, Paul.
You're most welcome. Most welcome.